Recording in progress.
All right, thank you, everyone. And Keelan, I'll be joining on my laptop in a minute. I'm on my phone for the time being. This is the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 afternoon session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, please call the roll.
Good afternoon. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Present.
Max.
Here.
Rubio. Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference. And the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you again for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this difficult situation to conduct the city's business. And with that, we'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Good afternoon. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the city council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you're a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that a further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
All right, very good. With that, we have one item this afternoon, item 471.
Amend the comprehensive plan map and zoning map for properties at 2636 Northeast Deacon Street, 6705 Northeast 27th Avenue, 6623 Northeast 27th Avenue, 6325 Northeast 27th Avenue, and 6305 Northeast 27th Avenue at the request of the Concordia University Foundation, LU 20-204990 CPZC.
Thanks, Keelan. First, we'll hear from the city attorney on some announcements about today's hearing.
Thank you. This is an evidentiary hearing. This means you may submit new evidence to council in support of your arguments. Testimony will be heard as follows. We will begin with the staff report by BDS for approximately 10 minutes. Following the staff report, the city council will hear from interested persons in the following order. The applicant will go first and will have 15 minutes to address the council. After the applicant, the council will hear from individuals or organizations who support the applicant's proposal. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. Next, council will hear from persons or organizations who oppose the applicant's proposal. Again, each person will have 3 minutes to speak. If there was testimony in opposition to the applicant's proposal, the applicant will have 5 additional minutes to rebut the testimony given in opposition to the proposal. As this is a non-emergency ordinance, it will pass to a second reading. The council may make amendments to the ordinance and findings or direct staff to return with amendments. For evidentiary hearings, I'd like to make several announcements about guidelines for those who will be addressing the city council today. For submitting evidence into the record, any letters or documents you wish to become a part of the record should be emailed to the council clerk after you testify. Similarly, the original or a copy of any slides, photographs, drawings, maps, videos, or other items you show to the council during your testimony, including PowerPoint presentations, should be given to the council clerk to make sure they are part of the record. Testimony must be directed to the approval criteria. Any testimony, arguments, or evidence you present must be directed toward the applicable approval criteria for this land use review or other criteria in the city's comprehensive plan or zoning code that you believe apply to this decision. The BDS staff will identify the applicable approval criteria as a part of their staff report to council. Issues must be raised with specificity. You must raise an issue clearly enough to give the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue. If you don't, you will be precluded from appealing to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The applicant must identify constitutional challenges to conditions of approval. If the applicant fails to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with enough specificity to allow the council to respond, the applicant will be precluded from bringing an action for damages in circuit court. That's it.
All right, thank you for that. So with that, first of all, do any members of the council wish to declare a conflict of interest? Not seeing any, no member of the council is declaring a conflict of interest. Do any members of the council have ex parte contacts to declare information gathered outside of this hearing to disclose? I am not seeing any commissioner raise their hand. Do any council members have any other matters that need to be discussed before we begin the hearing? And again, I'm not seeing that. So with that, we'll start with the staff report, approximately 10 minutes.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marguerite Feuersanger, and I'm a city planner with the Bureau of Development Services. And now I'm going to share my screen. I have a short PowerPoint. And I'm not finding it. Is it possible for the council clerk to help me with the presentation?
Yes, we can bring it up for you.
Oh, wait. I got it. Sorry. I think.
I went away again.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And don't feel bad because I don't think anybody who shared their screen today didn't have some hiccup. So I think
Thanks for that. You guys got it now?
Yeah.
Very good.
We see it.
Okay, yeah, it's unfortunately at the end. Okay. You get to see it twice.
I kind of like this.
Did you like that?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So hey, I am here, Marguerite Feuersanger. I'm representing the hearings officer recommendation. So this is a type 3 land use review, but it's a little atypical from what you normally see, you as council. When there are requests to change the comprehensive plan map, it requires 2 public hearings, one with the hearings officer who makes a recommendation, not a decision, to the city council. City council holds a hearing, which is happening today, and makes the final decision. This request is for Concordia University Foundation, which is the owner of the 5 individual properties. I want to also mention that the comprehensive plan is the city's plan for the property for a 20-year timeline. It's for the future development of the property. The zoning map is for what can happen today. So those are 2 separate reviews. In my presentation summary, I'll just go over the proposal briefly, show you some photos of the site, and then go over the approval criteria, and then the neighborhood comment, the testimony that was received by the hearings officer, and then the hearings officer's recommendation. So the proposal, this is essentially a change from an institutional campus designation to a single dwelling 5,000 designation. And then the corresponding zones are CI 1 and 5,000, residential 5,000. It's important just to give you a little bit of history on these sites, the 5 sites purchased by the foundation, they were zoned R5 when the University Foundation bought them. The plans were to incorporate them into the larger campus. Well, as you probably know, Concordia University ceased its operations about a year ago, and this large, it's 24 acres, site within Concordia neighborhood is vacant. So there's a lot of questions about that. But these properties were never really formally brought in to the campus. They were never redeveloped. And in fact, they continue to have residential buildings on them. Well, at least 4 of them do. 1 is vacant. So Concordia University is located just south of Lombard and Columbia Boulevard and north of Killingsworth. The western boundary generally is 27th Avenue. And these properties are all along the western side of Northeast 27th. So here we are, here's Deacom at the north and Holman at the south, and here's 27th Avenue. So the properties I'll be showing you today that are subject to this request are on the west side. And Concordia University, again, 100 years in Portland, landmark institution. This is one of the original buildings at Holman and 27th. So I found this campus map of the former university, which is a little bit helpful to orient you. Deacom Street is at the north, Holman at the south, and here's 27th Avenue. This is kind of the main academic center, or was, of the campus. So the properties that we're looking at today are at that northerly block, 3 of them, and the southerly block, 2 of them. This block here is not part of the request. It's developed with campus student housing, and it's not proposed to be changed. It's in the campus institutional zone. And here's the general lay of the land. Like the Concordia neighborhood is awash in R5 zoning. That's the yellow. And the university is shown, and you can see how large it is shown in the pink. That's that CI1 designation. And here, these little outliers, these are just separate houses that were never purchased by the university. But over time, the university grew and purchased, individual properties along that west boundary. So the applicant provided us with site plans of what's going on those 5 sites. So the northern blocks, these are the site plans that show the footprints of the buildings. And that north one has a duplex. That's right at Deacom in 27th. Then there's a house with a detached garage and another house with a detached garage. On the southern block, there's a house and then a vacant lot. And those are located here. Just want to make a quick note, if you were paying attention, the zoning maps all have this lowercase h designation, and that indicates that it's in the aircraft landing overlay zone. There's additional regulations because of the proximity to the airport. There's no development proposed here, and these regulations don't affect this proposal at this time. And again, the H overlay is not subject to be removed. It's not requested to be removed, and it would remain on the properties. Okay, just quickly, so you can see what the development looks like. This is on Deacom Street at the north end, and we're looking eastward. The first property, the duplex, is on the right-hand side, and I believe that's the oldest property of the group. And traveling southward on 27th on the west side, there's 1 house, property number 2, and the 3rd property, another house, and the 4th property, another house, and here we have the vacant piece that's right at the corner of Holman and 27th. So the approval criteria for the comprehensive plan map amendment is very rigorous. So it requires that an evaluation of all of the comprehensive plan policies, and it requires that the applicant show that the proposed designation, in this case residential, is equally or more supportive of the comprehensive plan as a whole. It also requires that it's consistent with Oregon's land use statewide planning goals. And the approval criteria found in Zoning Code Section 33, 810, 050A. Zone map amendment criteria, more straightforward. Really, the center question here is whether public services are available. When I say public services, I mean the transportation system, sanitary sewer, water, fire, police. Are those services adequate to serve the proposed use, which is residential? And those approval criteria are found in section 33855.050. Okay, so the hearing from the hearings officer, public hearing was held back in April, and the hearings officer did receive testimony from the public, and the folks that attended did not raise objections to the specific map amendment requests. They did pose questions, however, about what's going to happen with the larger campus and how will the properties that are subject to this review be sold. And in particular, the Seoul District Business Association, well, I think that they expressed a strong interest in pursuing ways that home ownership for Black households could be increased, especially here in this area of Northeast Portland, which has been subject to gentrification and displacement. The hearings officer's recommendation is for the 5 properties approval of the requested designations. And essentially, again, this is returning the properties back to that prior zone. The strength of the proposal, I feel, is that the existing institutional campus zone prohibits housing. Returning it back will allow these houses to remain, and with the residential infill project that will be implemented in August, will allow additional units to be placed on all of these sites. The other thing is that the land use pattern as a zoning, you can see that the R5 is suitable for the Concordia neighborhood, and it reaffirms the residential character of Northeast 27th. Here is the zoning map. Just finishing up here, the red hatched areas are the properties proposed to be rezoned to R5H. And that's it.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions about this thus far? Not seeing any, so we'll go to, thank you, Marguerite. Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies. I was slow getting to my hand raised button. Thank you very much, Margarita, for that presentation. I guess my question really has to do with what will happen with the university. And why are we doing this prematurely if the answer is we don't know what's going to happen to the university?
So I think that the applicant would be also happy to address that question. Right at this point in time, I don't know what's going to happen to the larger university. I'm not sure who does. These properties are owned by the foundation, and they were never really, there was never any physical changes made to them to incorporate them into the campus. So because the foundation owns them and not the university, I think that this is suitable for a separate request. I would also like to note that even though there's this new zone, the campus institutional zone that was created expressly for the city's large institutions, it still has a requirement that certain facilities, sports facilities in particular, such as amplification and number of seating, that if there were to be a new user for this campus, it would require a conditional use review. It would not be something that another entity would just take it over and start operating without anybody being aware of it.
Okay, so there are no plans for development today, but I guess for me, my concern is if we don't know that we're going to have an educational institution in that location, then I'm very concerned that we're making changes to a vision that I think was a really good vision and a very thoughtful long-term vision about what was possible. So again, I'm just trying to understand the sense of urgency of doing this now as compared to when the dust settles from the bigger issues that the university is experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And the foundation is connected to the university. So for my mind, the two aren't separate. They're actually interconnected. So maybe appellant will be the one that will explain that for me. But I don't see a difference between a foundation and a college because they work together, don't they?
I imagine so. One is a fundraising arm, yes.
So why don't we do this? If nobody else has any questions at the moment, why don't we turn this over to the applicant? They have 15 minutes, and Commissioner Hardesty asks a good question, and I'm hopeful the applicant would take some time to address that issue as well.
Okay, Peter, do you want to first start speaking on behalf of our application, and then I can step in as appropriate?
So my name is Peter Finley Fry. I work for the foundation, not the university. We'll address the commissioner's question at the end of our presentation. I wanted to begin by pointing out that they are different in ownership and control. And what we're trying to do is clean up the edge across the street, basically. The main campus, we're hoping, will be addressed through the Portland Bureau of Planning. And I know that we have been discussion, they have been in discussion with Eric Ingstrom at the Bureau of Planning to deal with the main campus and the sports arena, which is pretty substantial. I want to thank Margarita, and I want to thank Bureau of Development Services. In this case, this process has gone extremely smoothly and timely, despite the incredible challenges that the virus has caused all of us in terms of communication and working together and trying to move a land use process through the city. I also wanted to point out that this is very unique in that only comprehensive plan amendments require city council direct action. And this is not an appeal. We are not here on appeal. We are here on an open record. This is a completely wide open. Only city council has the power to change Portland's comprehensive plan. So you will not see this very often, except when someone asks for a quasi-judicial amendment. We would like to restore the zoning on the fragmented properties on the west side of 27th. As the staff has pointed out to you and the maps pointed out to you, this isn't one block. These are scattered houses for them. Once only a single, but it was constructed a duplex and then once a vacant lot. Our fundamental argument is that this establishes a clean edge to the campus. Deacon and Holman, which I've walked quite a lot and we've added a lot of pictures in our application, are basically one side is the neighborhood and one side is the university. It's a clear distinction. And if you look at it, you see the distinction. You see the houses lining Holman, you see the houses lining Deacon, and on the other side, you see the campus. On 27th, it's muddied up, and we want to clear that up so that 27th would be a clear boundary identical to the clear boundaries provided by Deacon and Holman. The last point I wanted to make is that we have worked with the community quite intensely, both the neighborhood and the Soul District. I will express a small conflict in that I worked for them about 30 years ago on the Albina plan with Commissioner Hardesty, in fact. And they were my client at that time. They're not now. They are my friends, and they are very active, and we will support them in every way we can. And they have been invited to tour the properties as well as nonprofit. And I'd like to introduce George Thurston, who's the president of the foundation now, and he can speak to that. George?
Thank you, Peter. The primary mission of the Concordia University Foundation was basically to provide financial support to the university through fundraising activities related to capital projects, as well as the building of an endowment fund that could be used, the earnings of which could be used for student scholarships. With the closure of the university, basically our mission has disappeared. And we are in the process of dissolving. And in that process of dissolving, we have dispersed all but $4 million of the restricted assets that we have are responsible for as a foundation, that are made up of the endowments of people who've made gifts to the university with very specific restrictions as to what they are. Right now, the endowment balances that have yet to be dissolved or dispersed are a little over 4 million. Included in that 4 million are the properties that we are talking about. So our objective and our motivation is to liquefy or liquidate those at fair market values as close as we can, so that we can continue with the dissolution of the foundation. We have had conversations with Colliers International, their broker, Michael Holzgang, who's confirmed that these particular peripheral properties really have in no way enhance the market value of the campus going forward. So we feel comfortable as a foundation by saying we should be able to independently sell these and convert them into the financial resources we need to make the final dissolution of the foundation. We are, though, recognizing that as part of our legacy, as part of the Concordia neighborhood, that we need to come up with a plan that is both responsive to the economic needs of the foundation, as well as meeting our objective of being a good neighbor. And in that respect, we are excited to be able to start our discussions with the staff of the Portland Community and Development Initiatives as they are looking at the properties for maybe making it part of their Progress 1000 plan to provide a means to provide either low-income rentals or low-income residences to the people of color that they are representing. So we're making no commitment that this will happen, but at the same time, we do feel that it would be something that would be of interest to the board in meeting what we believe is the legacy of Concordia, being a responsive to the neighborhood. So we believe the foundation needs to move ahead more quickly than perhaps Commissioner Hardesty thinks in order to get the financial resources we need to carry out the dissolution.
Okay, so I'm going to summarize quickly, and I'm going to address Commissioner Hardesty's question directly, in that, in my opinion, these properties are really not part of the university campus, let's just assume they were under the same ownership. These are 3 well-built, existing, affordable houses. They're older houses, so they're actually better built, frankly, than some of the newer houses that are being built. And the 4th structure is also well built. It's currently a single dwelling because the upper kitchen was removed, but it could be a duplex. And there are, with your Portland infill project, there may be other opportunities for both the vacant lot and the duplex lot to provide more housing. So we believe that we need to go forward, one, for fiduciary requirements and legal requirements. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just saying that. And more importantly, though, I would argue that these are houses, not potential university sites. And as a planner, I probably would not have added these properties into the campus to begin with, but I wasn't there for that decision, so I can't speak to that. So we need to clean this up. These are just, they're little properties off on the side, and we need to clean it up. And then we collectively as a community do need to push forward on what are we going to do with this huge, large piece of property as an opportunity. And that is something that I would hope the Bureau of Planning can provide a context to, particularly in the ability that the Planning Bureau has to involve the community in a real process. That's it. I'm sorry, I don't need to fill up all 15 minutes. And I thank you for coming in just for us. That's just amazing. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Peter, I think Commissioner Hardesty may have a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Peter and George, for your presentation. And so, Peter, based on what you just said, has the issues of ownership been resolved around Concordia University? I mean, because of course I'm not in those day-to-day conversations. Because my concern is if we don't know who owns it, then a whole lot of things could happen, right? And I'm just unclear of where that process is and whether any legal decisions have been made about that process. And again, for me, the two are connected because again, even though the foundation has its own board, I suspect that there was a significant crossover between your board and the board of Concordia, because that's what normally happens with foundations. And so again, we may say that on paper, we're separate organizations, but in order to do my due diligence, I just need to know where we are in that process and whether or not there's been any decisions. And if not, when do we expect decisions to be made?
Okay, so I'm going to start and then George can add. That question did come up a week ago, I believe. I don't know if it was your office, but we received a call from Margarita asking that very question. So I investigated that question. It is correct that there are board members on the foundation, board members on the university. That's accurate. And as any organization, Portland, there is clearly connections. What I understand, based on talking to the attorney and the Mike Holzgang, who's not yet, but may be the executor of the property, is that there's really two things going on. One is the disposition of the property itself. And my most recent information is the property will be auctioned off actually this month at a public auction, and that it's very likely that the Portland Lutheran group, if you will be the owner of it. And in that case, they would work with the Bureau of Planning directly. The other issues are relating to essentially economic damage, is what I've been told, and do not relate to the property ownership issues at all. And that court case is ongoing. But that doesn't relate to the disposition of property. It relates to the arrangements, if you will, the loans and the money and all that kind of stuff. George, do you want to add anything to that?
We checked with the attorney for Dunn Carney that is kind of watching the litigation on behalf of the foundation. There has been no lien or any injunction that would prevent us from the foundation from moving ahead with the sale of these particular properties. There is going to be on June 29th a foreclosure auction that will take place, in which the Lutheran Church Extension Fund is going to handle the process. They have a first security interest in that property. Again, that's just by looking over the fence to see what's happening. So we'll know more perhaps by June 29th, but that's just as to who will end up with the title. Then becomes the issue of how do you find somebody who is a willing buyer, and what will actually be the ultimate use of that. And that's where the city planners will be ultimately involved, because nothing's going to happen without City of Portland approval, that's for sure.
So back to your original question, Commissioner, we're actually asking for a quasi judicial change, meaning that we're asking for change for specific pieces of property, not a large legislative change. I would argue that the university itself would be more of a legislative because of the size and the complexity of that issue. So we're asking to just clean up these 5 so that they just go away. They're 3 houses. We don't want to tear the houses down. I don't think anybody really does want to do that. The vacant lot needs to be a house, in my opinion, not a new campus, not a new office building. The decom should be a house, not a new office building. We're trying to approach this from the point of view of the comprehensive plan and what is best for Portland, not necessarily what is best for the university.
All right, very good. Thank you for that discussion. That was excellent. We'll move now. Does that complete your presentation? I should have asked that, or have you said all you need to say for now?
It does, and we have no opposition so far. We've had people, so we don't need to have a rebuttal.
Well, you wait and just see. Peter, one thing that just sort of struck me about this particular hearing and what makes it different, and I guess I want to say this on the record, when we do what is effectively spot zoning changes, they tend to be very controversial, but it's almost always the other way. We're usually going from residential to some commercial or industrial use. And that, as you well know, creates a degree of uncertainty, anxiety, and consternation on the part of local residents. In this case, we're actually going the other way to reflect, in effect, the status quo. And so my question was going to be, what kind of resistance, if any, of you experienced? I guess we'll have an opportunity here for public comment if somebody does, but would you agree that this is a slightly different scenario than some of the other discussions or debates we've had as a council?
Absolutely. It is very complicated legally and technically. It's the second most complicated land use thing you can do, a goal exception being the most complicated. On the other hand, and people have raised questions, as the commissioners raised, but the support has been universal.
All right, good. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you get to public testimony, my questions were, you're right. The application is really straightforward, right? We have what used to be zone residential, and you're asking to go back. So for me, that's not the issue. It's the other outstanding issues and how they impact the decision that you're asking us to make at this moment. And so that is the nature of my questions and concern. And because, you've given me more information today than I've had since Concordia closed. So it gives me a little bit more confidence, but I also will do some of my own research to find out, do we get to participate in the auction? Because I would really love for the city of Portland to own Concordia. And so, those are questions that you raised for me today that I will have to get an answer to. Because, housing is critical. Housing that people can afford to live in is even more critical. And so I don't want to make any quick decision that ultimately we find out that there's some liability that wasn't actually articulated. And then we are moving down a path that is not a good one. So, and Peter, I've known you forever. So I really, I have a high degree of regard for both your work and your individual integrity. George, I don't have the pleasure of knowing you as well as I know Peter, because Peter and I both didn't have gray hair when we first met. So that is my big concern. And that's why I wanted to make sure it was on the public record and with as much information as we could have.
Okay.
Mayor, before we end today, I would also like to make sure that our legal counsel actually addresses this concern on the public record as well.
That is fine. Would they like to do that at this moment?
And just to clarify, Commissioner Hardesty, your concern is acting before,
Before any conclusion has been made about liability, who's responsible, who are the responsible parties, how are those dollars going to be collected, et cetera, et cetera.
So a couple of things. First, as this is a land use decision that will change the zoning and will run with the land. So it will apply, council's decision today will apply to any subsequent owner, regardless of what happens, buy, sale, bankruptcy, et cetera. So in terms of who owns the property from a land use purpose and continuity, that's not relevant, what's happening. And then the other piece that I just want to make sure I respond to is what you have in front of you is a quasi judicial application. So it's an application to the council that the city does need to act on and follow inconsistent with the criteria in the code. And so the criteria require that council consider whether or not the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so that is going to be the scope of your review. If the concern is, well, we don't know what's going to happen to the larger site, we would have to point to something in the comprehensive plan that requires us to consider that question.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And actually, for me, the question is really around, does the foundation have the authority to come and make this request, knowing that we're in the midst of a legal process, right? So it's like, is this the right party that's making the request? Is this a legal process that we are being asked to weigh in on? And so for me, this is the first one in 3 years that's been like this. And I've never seen one where there was this big, all this other stuff was happening behind the scene and we're really focused on 4 properties. So that's where my concern comes.
So this question was raised to our office last week about the status of the ownership. And we did explore kind of making sure we were clear about who the owner was for the purposes of this application. And we did not have any concerns.
Thank you. That's very helpful for me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Maps.
Sure, thank you. And Lauren, I might keep you on the line for a second if I may. This is my first land use hearing of this type. I'm just trying to clarify my own role here. I get the impression the question before me today is the proposal before us consistent with the comp plan? And I think I heard Margarita's presentation that we also have to make sure that this proposal is consistent with statewide planning rules. Just so it's clear and on the record, is this proposal consistent in staff's view with the comp plan?
Are you asking me or Marguerite?
Whoever's best prepared.
I'll leave it to staff.
Staff made a recommendation to the hearings officer, which is, the answer is yes, that we found it consistent with the statewide planning goals. Mm-hmm. The hearings officer reviewed the staff report and accepted it in its entirety.
Okay. Do you have any concerns that you think that council should explore around this particular proposal before us today?
I did have concerns about the ownership, and I did ask Peter, the applicant, to verify that the foundation would continue to hold the properties throughout this process until the decision is final. And he said yes, that would be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Maps. All right, at this point, we will hear from supporters of the applicant. That is as represented by George and Peter. If there are people here who would like to testify in favor of what they heard there, this would be the time to testify. Keelan, has anybody signed up?
No one signed up, Mayor.
All right, very good. Do we have any opponents of the applicant who
No.
would like to testify? Nobody to oppose either. So Peter, you mentioned you probably don't need a rebuttal. Does that still stand?
Mayor, that's correct. That's Peter Fry. That is correct.
Okay, then at that point, then we have council discussion. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that for the record, that I think this is the very first land use hearing I've ever been to where there was no one speaking in support and no one speaking in opposition. I just want the record to reflect that Never happened before, probably never again, but here we are.
All right, then with that, would anybody object if I close the evidentiary record, including you, Lauren? Is there any reason why we cannot do that?
No, that's fine. We can go, council can go ahead and close the record.
All right, then the evidentiary record in this hearing is now.
Mr. Mayor, can I pose one more question before we close the record?
I think we can still, we can still have deliberation.
Okay, then close the record.
Yes,
I'll ask my question.
this means the council will accept no more oral or written testimony on this land use appeal, but we can still have the discussion. Commissioner Hardesty, did you have your hand raised again? Commissioner Maps?
Sure. I'd like to pose a question, I think, to George. I don't think you have to answer this question, but I'm curious, and if you're able to share, that would be great. So I think I understand what you're doing. The foundation is trying to liquidate its assets because the university is in the process of dissolving. Do you have a sense of how and what you're going to use this $4 million for? Does it get donated to the university? You're going to give it out to good causes, or do you not know yet? Or is it none of my business? And if it's none of my business, I think I get that too.
No, actually, it's very telling. The current board is recognizing that one of the important programs that Concordia University, through its College of Education, was involved in, as well as the foundation, was the creation of the 3 to PhD program at Fabian School. In conjunction with Portland Public Schools, Trillium and Kaiser Health Services, Fabian became a model of how wraparound services and enhancing the education of the experience for the students, as well as care and concern for their families, was such an important part of helping these young people become successful. We are, as a foundation, currently studying, working with the Northeast STEAM Coalition, working with the ways to provide resources that can support STEAM education in the schools in Northeast Portland. We don't want to limit it necessarily just to Fabian, but feeling that these technical education skills will be an important step for helping these young people think of themselves in a more proactive way of being successful professionals. So we are working, actually working with Nancy Davis and pulling together a roadmap of how the foundation could use those remaining funds. The big question we still haven't addressed is, okay, what happens after the 4 million is gone? Do we get back into the fundraising business? And we're a little hesitant to do that because of the amount of energy and effort that might be involved. But no, at least right now, our focus would be on using those funds, assuming that the state attorney general would feel that that was a reasonable repurposing for the endowments that are left to do that. Sorry for the long answer. Peter says sometimes I need to shorten my answers up.
Well, let me say, I'm really glad I asked that question. And I'm really delighted to hear about your vision. And I want to thank the foundation for its work on behalf of the university over the years, and the really constructive response that you folks have come up with to this very difficult situation.
Thank you. So Lauren, at this point, is it appropriate for me to ask if there is a tentative motion on the hearing officer's recommendation?
Yeah, if there's no further discussion with council, yes.
It does not appear so. We didn't have any testimony. This all feels rather one-sided. So unless there's any other burning issues, I'll entertain a motion.
So move, Mayor, that we approve the recommendation from the hearings officer.
All right, very good. And this is, of course, a tentative motion. We will not be taking the final vote. Is there any further discussion?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Ryan. And so we will take the tentative vote, Lauren, correct? Keelan, please call the roll.
Ryan,
So when I'm in hearings, I feel like I get confused on if it's a yay or nay. But my point is, I believed everything I heard, and I accept the hearings officer's recommendation. For the record, I just want to say it's been a grieving process for a lot of us in the city. I was actually quite involved from being on the school board back when the Fabian School was repurposed to be in relationship with Concordia. I am on the board at Trillium Family Services, and so I'm well aware of the 3 to PhD work that connects mental health, something our city and our state really needs to invest more intelligence in. And I trust that the main campus will be repurposed to something unimaginable in a really good way. So I look forward to those dialogue, just like Commissioner Hardesty said. And it was, when I first saw this, I had the same thoughts, like how do you decouple where we're going with this incredible asset? And after being briefed well by my staff member and then listening to this hearing today, it's really clear that this is a necessary step to clean it up and get the borders all cleaned up and clear. And so now, Lauren, I vote aye, right? After saying all that?
Yes, aye.
Yeah, once I messed up on these, I'm forever have PTSD around that. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
I thank you, Peter and George, for your testimony. Margarita, I appreciate the detailed presentation that you provided to us today. And again, there was absolutely no questions about what was in writing. It was all those other questions that were in my head that I felt were really important to both have on the public record, as well as to make sure that we were moving in a way that was legally appropriate and gave us as many options as possible. There's no questions that we need more housing in North Portland that people can afford to live in. And there's no question that Concordia is a beautiful neighborhood and anybody would be lucky to live in that area. I will also say that Concordia has traditionally been a very fine community partner, whether it was allowing the NAACP Portland branch to have our meetings there, whether it was the real support that you gave to the Black Parents Initiative. You have really been a model of quietly supporting and engaging the community in ways that really help build the voices of folks who traditionally are not affiliated with university activities. And so I am talking to the foundation, I know, but if you will share my message with the board members who unfortunately had to make the hard decision to close Concordia, to know that you have been excellent community partners and you have stepped up in ways that the public will never know to support the community. So thank you very much, and I vote aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye. This means that we have tentatively voted to uphold the hearings officer's recommendation to council. We'll be taking a final vote, Keelan, when?
well, it's my understanding, and I'll ask Lauren to confirm that this item would pass the second reading next week and be on the regular agenda.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so this will then pass to a second. This is a first reading. Effectively, we've taken a tentative vote. It will go to a second reading next week during the regular agenda. Do we know, is that Wednesday or Thursday?
Sorry, and actually, Keelan, can we get a time start and it would just be a quick vote next week?
I'm looking now to see what we have. Yeah, we could probably, let's see here. At 10:45, we could probably do a quick 10-minute time certain.
Okay, yeah, it should be a date. Thank you.
Okay, so that's Wednesday, correct? At 10:45 next week?
Yeah, Wednesday, the 23rd at 10:45.
Wednesday, the 23rd, 10:45, time certain, be there. All right, does that complete our business for this afternoon? Lauren, anything we forgot?
Nope, you did
All
great.
right. Thanks, colleagues. Thank you, George. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Marguerite. Excellent work. We are adjourned.